The human eye. It provides us with about 80% of our knowledge of the world about us. Yet unaided, it's strictly limited. It can't, for instance, penetrate the bland exterior of an egg to see the growing life inside. Perhaps you've dreamed of having such X-ray eyes, or maybe eyes that could reach to the limits of the universe, to travel among stars yet unnamed. These shining objects are not stars, but microscopic plants. The infinitely small is just as hidden from us as the infinitely distant. From the whirling nebulae to the pulsing life inside an amoeba, there's a vast wealth of visual experience most of us are never likely to share. The secret world of strange and hidden life beneath the surface of the Earth, for example. Or the far different and extraordinary life beneath the surface of the trout stream. If only our unaided eyes could see nature revealed in startling scenes like this. Human eyes, coupled to human brain, are capable of many feats. But beyond the scope and range of the human eye, there's a whole world you can never see. In the village of Hanborough in Oxfordshire, close to where Winston Churchill was born and buried, works an extraordinary team of scientists. Men who can make your wildest optical fantasies come true. Often they meet to discuss new photographic techniques in their village pub.
If you have a cover, you've got the advantage of being able to possibly film at times when the weather's not so good.
There's this thing whether you want to do it in daylight or artificial light too. If you put a cover over it, then you can't use daylight.
Yes, you have to choose totally one way or the other.
Yeah, right.
And feed them on anything else?
I don't think so. I think they catch...
Gerald Thompson is elder statesman and founder of the group. He's a forester by training. He started nature filming to illustrate the way in which insects damage trees.
I mean, as well as the tank facility.
Peter Parks is an artist, a fine draftsman and also a craftsman in metal and wood. He's perfected new techniques for filming microscopic animals and plants. John Cook, world authority on spiders, and recently a curator at the Museum of Natural History in New York.
Because you get a lot of absorption.
Like the rest of the group, John Paling is a graduate of Oxford University. He lectured there on freshwater biology. David Thompson, Gerald's son, specializes in filming small mammals. Sean Morris rode for Oxford University. He's the time-lapse expert. All these men are scientists first and foremost, but scientists who are superb technicians. Their work takes them all over the world, but most of their revelations are made in a modest establishment set in a leafy English lane, which they were kind enough to invite me to open a few years ago. On a summer's morning, Peter Parks walks through the woods to the studios. Nature is at its richest all round him. Yet Parks's special talents lead him away from nature's most obvious manifestations. Held in the leaf of a teasel, a kind of thistle, is a drop of water, perhaps splashed there by a passing footstep. For Peter Parkes, the water drop contains a familiar world, but one the rest of us probably never imagine exists, and certainly never see. As a zoologist, each member of the group knows how his living subject will behave. As technicians, they can design apparatus that will capture its actions naturally and without danger to its delicate structure. This camera bench, designed by Parkes and largely built by him in the group's workshops, enables him to film microscopic objects against a dark background. It would be no good expecting to find life like this inside a drop of sterile tap water. This water has matured in the countryside, where it's become peopled with all manner of minute plants and animals, so minute that thousands at a time could pass through the eye of a needle. It's a typical drop of pond water. These pulsating bean-like creatures are cyprids, crustacea, far smaller than a pinprick. Not an exquisite plant opening, but a colony of single-celled animals called vorticella. All within the same drop, a cloud of very common animals, paramecium, each about 3/1000th of an inch long. Stentor, a most versatile creature. It can live in colonies like this, or as free-swimming individuals. The droplet is a positive underwater garden of microscopic plants. These are volvox, exceedingly primitive colonies of single-celled plants. The spots inside each volvox are known as daughter colonies. The plant reproduces by ejecting these, rather like an animal giving birth. Inside a drop of water no more than 1/4 of an inch wide, quite large animals actually do give birth, or at least try to. This Daphnia, or water flea, is having considerable trouble launching its young into the world. Another Daphnia shows the way it should be done. The success or failure of one water flea to reproduce its kind really makes very little difference to the teeming microscopic community of the water drop, a world that's only put truly into proportion by the intrusion of a commonplace object, a pinhead. Life in a drop of fresh water is incredible enough, but what about seawater? Peter Parkes' technique can show you an even more bizarre world in the splash of a wave. The planktonic creature seen through the eye of a needle is a copepod, the sea's equivalent of land's teeming insects. Copepods are basic items of fish food. This antenna, highlighted by dark ground illumination, belongs to a species usually found in deeper water. All the same, you could easily swallow a few hundred of them when swimming, and you probably have. Close by, in the same saltwater drop, the spidery larva of a mantid lobster. It's a fiercely predatory animal with claws for grabbing its even smaller plankton prey. Its eyes are on stalks. This predatory copepod wears contact lenses, or rather extension lenses. The retina of each eye is set near the middle of its body. There's the tiny extension lens. Now another weird creature flashes into Peter Parks's field of view. It's a medusa, a tiny jellyfish, the larval form of a hydroid, perhaps a 50th of an inch in diameter. These are snail larvae that have had to learn, so to speak, to fly in water to support their minute, but to them weighty shells. The waving cilia, or hairs, that resemble flashing neon lights are the means by which the animal extracts its food from the water. It's hard not to compare these weird and beautiful life forms with items of man's most sophisticated hardware, space satellites. But the secrets of aquatic life aren't all microscopic. To study larger life forms, John Paling goes to a trout stream, the River Evenlode, which flows right past the studios. A trout stream may look clear from the vantage point of a bridge, but when you start filming underwater, it's about as clear as vegetable soup. So Paling has built his own trout stream inside the studios. The Evenlode provides the specimens for it, plants as well as animals. Essentially, his captive river is a large tank, but the amount of zoological knowledge that's gone into its design is the reason that trout behave naturally inside it. They can even be persuaded to spawn. To get them to do so was the ultimate object of several years' experiment and planning. The weed waves in the artificial current of Paling's indoor river. And after weeks of acclimatization, the trout are swimming naturally against that current and posing before the mirror of Paling's periscopic camera. Once again, the camera gear has been designed and built on the premises. This is only one of several cameras that will pry on the courtship of the trout, a courtship that begins after many weeks of patient watching when the male trout begin to fight among themselves. The males jockey for the privilege of attendance on a female. For the moment, this male has won. He knows that the female just ahead of him is ready to spawn. John Paling, too, recognizes the signals she's giving. The female trout starts to cut the red, or nest, on the riverbed. The fierce beats of her tail don't actually touch the gravel, but whip up a current that can shift quite large stones. The dominant male moves up alongside and shivers to excite her. She responds with more cutting, but she isn't ready to shed her eggs yet. Paling was only able to persuade his trout to spawn by reproducing the exact conditions they look for in the river. Exactly the right size of gravel, for example. The male trout has now moved up in close attendance, shivering and rubbing his flank against the female. Both he and John Paling behind the camera watch for the sign that the female is ready to lay her eggs. She lowers her anal fin into the nest she's excavated, feeling out the exact spot where she must spawn. The male moves up. In the current, his milt has approximately 2 seconds to fertilize the eggs. The eddy created by the hollow nest retains the milk just long enough. Immediately the female starts to cover the fertilized eggs. A few eggs are lost to be snapped up by unsuccessful males lurking downstream. Developing eggs lie deep in the gravel, but even there they aren't entirely safe. Little believing it would work, John Paling introduced a dipper to his artificial river. Immediately the little bird began to hunt for trout eggs, giving these unique shots of a dipper flying underwater in order to feed. Well, filming nature takes more than skill or even a university degree. It requires incredible patience, plus a kind of sixth sense to know when the time is ripe. Take John Paling's experience in filming puffballs, for instance. Before he could even set up his camera, he not only had to wait for the right time of year, but precisely the right weather conditions as well. Puffballs are a kind of fungus, and this particular kind grows on rotten tree trunks. They have an ingenious method of distributing their spores. Their method of reproduction gave Paling ideas for a distinctly out-of-the-ordinary film sequence. When the leaves are stripped from the trees in early winter, the puffballs wait, ready and primed like a miniature minefield. All they need is a rainy day to provide the detonator. On the bare branches above them, that detonator hangs poised, a super drop of collected rainwater. A normal raindrop is not heavy enough to punch out the spores through the hole in the puffball. As the trees dry out after the storm, heavy drops continue to collect and fall. A wood mouse surfaces to find himself in an unexpectedly explosive situation. John Paling was deliberately having fun when he set this sequence up. But he had a serious purpose too, to show how small mammals help in distributing the puffball spores. Another kind of puff, one that illustrates the expertise of David Thompson, the group's small mammal man. Each puff moistens mud already plastered onto a highly ingenious device. This has been designed to get around the problems of filming a subterranean creature, the European mole. The mole is introduced to a circular run that rotates on an old car axle. When the wheel is gently rotated, the mole starts to move, while of course staying exactly in front of the camera. The mole doesn't know it, but it's getting nowhere fast. It's a gimmick, but how else could you show the mole's underground travels when all you can see from the surface is the spoil from its excavations, nuntidumps as they're called in some parts of the country. The mole's treadmill has only been devised to link together the main events of its secret underground life. Events like the rearing of its young, shown here for the very first time in a wildlife film. This family group would normally be concealed deep in the earth. It's truly part of the world you never see. This miniature pond is bathed in what its inventor calls cold light. Gerald Thompson, founder and father figure of the group, is an entomologist, an insect specialist. The heat generated by powerful film lights would kill insects in seconds. And so he combined filters with flasks of water, which between them get rid of the heat and concentrate a soft pool of cold light on the subject. The subject before Gerald Thompson's lens is a particularly delicate and some would say irritating one, an emerging mosquito. The legs of the insect are coiled inside the pupa like a spring. They begin to unwind. The head of the pupa cracks open, ready for the mosquito to exchange a life in water for a life in air. The compound eye peers many-lensed at the surface world. The insect twitches to free itself. The high-powered lenses reveal the extraordinary plastic nature of water's surface film. It looks almost like molten glass. But once the mosquito is sitting on the surface, the water resembles an ice rink on which the insect slides at the slightest movement of air. Before you swap the next mosquito that bites you, you may care to reflect on the fragile beauty revealed here. Gerald Thompson's next trick seems to me a positive tour de force, a star turn. Thompson's earlier scientific career was dedicated largely to studying the insect pests that attack trees. He has a particular affection for a pest called Vrosserus gigas, the largest of the wood wasps, an insect which specializes in assaulting conifers in a most remarkable way. Thompson is positioning a length of specially sawn pine tree before his cold lights, and all this expressly for the benefit of the wood wasp. The wood wasp is a very large insect. Even so, you'd hardly expect it to possess the strength and skills it's about to demonstrate. What it's doing at the moment is prospecting for a suitable site in which to lay its eggs in a pine tree. Immediately below the abdomen is the ovipositor sheath. The ovipositor itself, the egg-laying device, is already boring vertically down into the wood. It's a high-powered drill, capable of penetrating more than an inch into the tree trunk. The drill is made in 3 sections, called stylets, which slide one against the other. The sheath protects the stylets when they're not in use. The ridges of the outer surfaces of the moving stylets do the actual drilling. When the ovipositor is fully home, the eggs are carried down between the stylets to its tip. In nature, of course, they'd be laid in the narrow tunnel made by the drill. When all the eggs have been laid, the wood wasp withdraws its ovipositor from the tree. This is how the eggs look when laid in the natural state in a tree trunk. As far as the wood wasp is concerned, the job's finished. The eggs are safely hidden and left with all the timber that the emerging grubs can possibly eat. The tree will suffer in the process. In 2 years' time, the grubs will have chewed up enough wood to become large and fat, eventually to emerge as another generation of wood wasps. Unfortunately for them, that isn't always the way things turn out. Enter a second and even more amazing insect, an ichneumon fly. Virtually all ichneumon species lay their eggs in or on the grubs or pupae of other insects. You'd think the grub of a wood wasp would be safe, but by some uncanny means, the ichneumon can detect where it lies. Then she begins her drilling operation to reach it. So fine and rapier-like is her ovipositor that at first she keeps it within the sheath to support it while she drills. Not even experts like Gerald Thompson have any explanation as to how the ichneumon locates her hidden target. The sheath is still in position, but as her ovipositor sinks deeper into the tree, she suddenly whips it away and goes to work solely with the naked blade that bends under the strain. The wood wasp grub stirs. It'll be one of its last movements. Unerringly, the ovipositor reaches it, but not immediately to lay an egg there. She injects a poison that doesn't kill, but makes the grub dormant. Then she withdraws her drill for the next act in the drama. She doesn't always make a second drilling, but in this case, she decides to bore a fresh hole into the tree trunk to lay her egg. The single egg is long and worm-like. It's laid on top of the dormant grub on which the ichneumon young will feed when it hatches out. Soon she'll seek out another wood wasp victim, perhaps in a quite different pine tree. All that remains for the present is to pull out her 1.5-inch long ovipositor, sheath it again, and clean up after her exertions. And that's one wood wasp grub that won't eat any more pine trees. The ichneumon egg lies coiled on it like a little time bomb. As an entomologist, Gerald Thompson finds wood wasps and ichneumons exceptionally fascinating, not to say attractive insects. But for sheer beauty in the insect world, he turns to butterflies. To film exotic species, it's usually necessary to grow plants not native to Britain. A crop of milkweed from Florida, for instance. A group of beautiful Gulf fritillaries feed on the nectar of this plant. The butterflies mate on yet another specially grown plant, passion flower. The first eggs to be laid appear as small yellow dots. You might easily overlook them with the unaided eye. But Thompson's camera makes them look like golden heads of miniature maize, or perhaps on closer inspection a tiny hand grenade. The life which eventually explodes from this is a minute caterpillar. This insignificant creature will eventually transform itself into a magnificent butterfly. But it has many stages of life to pass through yet. The caterpillar will split its skin a number of times during its brief life, emerging bigger and more imposing on each occasion. Scientists call these different stages of growth instars. Already at the first instar, it has the spines that will look so intimidating in its final caterpillar form. Thompson filmed this fritillary caterpillar at the exact moment when it was preparing to turn itself into a chrysalis. First, it spins a pad of web on a passion flower stalk. It will hang from this by a pair of hooks during the process of making the amazing internal body changes we call metamorphosis. You can see the last skin change to the chrysalis taking place in this highly speeded up sequence. First, the outer skin of the caterpillar shrinks while the future body of the butterfly inside contracts. Now for the neatest trick of all. The old skin of the caterpillar has to be shrugged off towards the top, which is the tail of the slowly forming chrysalis. All this time, the only things holding the creature to that stalk are the two hooks in the old caterpillar skin. But that skin is about to be discarded. It's the chrysalis that has to hold on now with its own hooks. Watch how it gets rid of the caterpillar skin and makes the changeover. Now greatly speeded up the final stage of becoming a chrysalis. One chrysalis doesn't succeed and falls to the ground, where its chances of producing a butterfly will be far, far smaller. For the lucky ones, the moment of emergence arrives many weeks later. The Gulf fritillary is possibly the most beautiful butterfly from the southern states of America. Now it pumps up the tiny veins in its still soft mother-of-pearl wings. They harden, and it has become the perfect insect. Sean Morris is a beekeeper. Like many of the group, he sees in his own pursuits novel approaches to nature filming. He's even built a special runway from the garden outside his studio to a comb in front of his cameras. He did this in order to record minute details of the honey-making process. But Sean is the group's time-lapse and high-speed film expert. And so it was perhaps inevitable that he should turn his super high-speed cameras onto bees in flight. He discovered, to his surprise, just what inefficient aviators they really are. High-speed filming produces low-speed action. The opposite is the time-lapse process. This enables movements which may take days to be shown in a few seconds. The wind seems to blow, but there is no wind. And so far, science can't explain why milkweed seedlings wave their arms like this twice every 24 hours. By exposing one frame of film every quarter of an hour, instead of 25 frames each second, Morris makes fungi burst triumphantly from the ground only to wither apparently seconds later. The milkweed plant on which Gulf fritillary is fed bursts into a ripeness of seeds. And when the wind blows, individual seeds take off like parachutists to seek their own place in which to germinate. How do you feel about spiders? Tarantulas, for example. John Cook feels only affection for them. But then he's a leading expert on arachnids, spiders in other words. A tarantula bite, though painful, certainly isn't lethal. Nor does it send you mad, nor do you need to perform a wild dance to cure its bite, as legend suggests. Nevertheless, it pays to handle a tarantula with care. It has a nasty habit of shooting hairs, which create a terrible itch into anyone who annoys it. But it isn't necessary to go to tropical lands to find fascinating spider behavior. Far more exciting species than the outsized tarantula live in the green English countryside. On a recent field trip, Gerald Thompson searched for specimens for John Cook's cameras. The species they were looking for was a purseweb spider called Atipus. The spider makes a cigar-shaped web among the grass roots. Here, Atipus lives inside this tunnel, which hides it completely. It waits hidden inside what looks rather like an animal dropping for a victim to land on the outside. The spider's entrance is at the bottom of the web, where it seldom shows itself as openly as this. Atipus relies entirely on feel and vibration to know when an insect has alighted on the outside of its web. It positions itself below and makes a sudden grab through the web. That time the fangs missed. When another green bottle approaches, it's ready for action once more. This time it makes a catch. The fangs inject a poison to kill the victim. But now Atipus has to drag the fly into its lair. First, it allows time for the venom to take effect. When the fly begins to quieten down, Atipus deliberately cuts a slit in its own painstakingly woven web, and then pulls the green bottle down into its tunnel. But Atipus is left with a hole in its roof, which would give the game away to future victims. And so the spider immediately goes to work to repair the damage with a fresh network of web. And all this takes place without your suspecting it in a normal grassy meadow. One of John Cook's favourite spiders is a foreigner who has managed to colonize a few sites in Britain. Segestria lives in old brickwork. This brick wall is only 2 feet square. It's yet another set in the studios of Oxford Scientific Films. Segestria is sometimes called the fishing line spider. Its web consists of a series of fine lines laid over the brickwork. Segestria sits in the middle, feet feeling the lines, just like an angler waiting for a bite. The fish in this instance is a bee. It advances until it eventually touches a line. The line gives a telltale pull at the outside of Segestria's lair. This time the spider waits a second or two, perhaps to be quite certain a fish is really there. Very often the spider darts out to land its catch immediately, like this. The bee tries to sting the spider, but the sting gets caught in the web and is pulled bodily out. The poison sac has muscles of its own which continue pumping. Now Segestria has only to immobilize the bee and eat it at its leisure. One tip that John Cook passes on to bees and others who have reason to be interested in the whereabouts of Segestria: look for the debris on the ground beneath. Even spiders find parts of their meal indigestible. The group's techniques are usually designed to reveal hidden aspects of natural behavior, a world already in existence but one you normally never see. One special technique reveals much more: the creation of a whole world in miniature of life itself, or at least the growth of life, the life inside a fertile hen's egg. Having sawn round the shell, Peter Parkes prizes it open with a scalpel. Keeping it submerged in a special fluid which will permit the early stages of life to develop, he carefully decants the albumin, which contains the as yet invisible life, and the yolk that will support it. By this means, it's possible to film the vital first 3 days of the chick's growth. After that, a second method has to be used to capture the story of the remaining 17 days before the chick emerges. And this involves cutting a circular window without damaging the fragile membrane inside. It's at moments like this that the manual and mechanical skills of these incredible filmmakers really become important. Parkes carefully scribes the circular window with a pair of calipers. As with all this kind of filming, it's the discovery of the method and the perfection of techniques that take the time. Even techniques as apparently simple as how to saw a circular hole in an eggshell. From these mechanical and prosaic beginnings, Peter Parkes now creates a unique film sequence that is both breathtaking and, I find, profoundly moving. It's moving because when you've watched the emergence of a single insignificant life from inside this eggshell, you feel as though you've witnessed the entire process of creation. At 2 days, the heart is pumping. Individual corpuscles can be seen hurrying through the newly formed blood vessels. At 4 days, the embryo, drawing its food from the yolk, is developing a miraculous network of veins and arteries. Both brain and eye can be seen at 5 days. The chick stirs inside its shell, like a human embryo inside its mother. 11 days have passed, and much of the yolk has been absorbed. The processes of growth are becoming more and more insistent. The skills of Peter Parkes have opened a window on a world we normally never see. Now, on the 20th day, a new life has opened its own door and joined the familiar world all living things must share, ourselves included.